Hi, this is Simon from Tokyo Productions and welcome to another tutorial for Motion 5. And today we're going to be looking at techniques for creating a circular music visualizer that a lot of you have asked about. So this is what it's going to look like. Okay, so first of all I need to apologise for still working in Motion 5.2, but to move over to 5.3 would cause a huge amount of disruption, so I hope you can live with 5.2 for the purposes of this tutorial. There are really no significant differences in 5.3 other than the ugly interface, so it really shouldn't make too much difference to you. Okay, so first of all, let's have a look at our project properties. I'm going to make it 30 seconds long, and the size is 1920 1080. You obviously want to make it as long as your music track is going to be, but this is going to be good enough for my purposes. So next I'm going to come over to the file browser and I'm going to grab my music track and I'm going to just drag it into the layers pane here. And if I came over to my audio timeline, you can see the track down there. Okay, let's close that on up again. And our first step is to create a rectangle. So come down here to the rectangle tool and I'm just going to draw a random rectangle like that, because then we're going to come over to the inspector and set it up properly. So I'm going to click on the geometry tab, open up the size, I'm going to set the width to 5 and the height to 100. I'm going to come over to properties, I'm going to center it up. And I want to set the anchor point to the top of this rectangle, so I'm going to enter a value of 50, bearing in mind of course that my rectangle is 100 pixels high. Then what I'm going to do is come to Object, Replicate. And my first step is going to be to change the shape to a circle and set the arrangement to Outline. Then we want to come down here and turn on the Align Angle switch. Next we want to set the number of points to 110. Okay, so our next step is going to be to chop this up into 5 segments, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to mirror this effect down the middle. So I only need to build one side and there'll be 5 segments on that side and they'll be mirrored on the left hand side. So in order to make my first segment, I'm going to come over to the opacity here and I'm going to click on the top and I want to set that location to 10% and the opacity down to 0. And then I want to click on the first tab there and come to Interpolation, Constant. Let me just turn off the Adjust Item tool so we can see a bit better what's happening. So there you go, I've got a segment that is 1/10 of the overall circumference of the circle. Now I just need to align it to the top here, and to do that I need to enter an offset of -25. You can see that's now starting at the top and starting to move round the circle in this direction clockwise. So my next step is to add an audio behavior to this. And what I want to do is I'll add the audio behavior to the Y scale. So I'm going to twirl open the scale properties here. I'm going to set the Y down to 5% initially, and then I'm going to right click, add parameter behavior, audio. I just want to set the ceiling to 0.25 and I want to add the music track, so I'll select it from this drop down menu here, or you could open up the audio timeline and drag it in from there like so. Okay, let's close up the audio timeline again. Let's see what's happening there. I want to set the scale to 0.25. And then what I want to do is I want to come back to my replicator cell, twirl open Scale Randomness. That's that one there, below Scale End. I'm going to select the Y value, right click, add parameter behavior, link. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to link it to this same replicator cell. So I'm going to take a rectangle, that's that one here, and drag it into the source object well there. And under compatible parameters, I'm going to select Object, Scale, Y. That's the one where we've attached the audio. So now if we press play, we've got something a little bit more random. So what I also want to do to add a little bit more life to it is take the link scale value and also link it to that Y scale of the object. I know this sounds confusing, but just bear with me. So select the scale, right click, add parameter behavior, link. Again, we'll drag in the rectangle there. That's this one here, not the replicator, just the rectangle, which is the replicator cell. And again, we're going to come to Object, Scale, Y. And now if you look at this scale value here as I play, just watch, observe this scale value. You can see it's being driven up and down by the same scale value, and it's made a little bit more of an interesting shape here. If I turn that link, that second link, on and off, you can see the difference that's made. It's added that extra randomness. It'll look a little bit more lively and interesting. So before we move on, there's something we need to do, which is to come to the audio behavior there, select that, and I want to add this source audio well to a rig. So it doesn't really matter what kind of rig we use. We're literally just using this for one purpose and one purpose only. So I'm going to select a checkbox. And now that is in the rig there, this checkbox rig. And what I'm going to call this is track changer. Because once we've built up our 5 frequency bands, they'll all appear in this one rig here. And it'll be easy to swap out the track. I'll explain that a little bit later, but bear with me for now. Okay, so let's call this high, because that's our high frequencies. And we need to do one other thing, which is come over to the audio here. And what I want to do is I want to publish the low and the high frequency. And again, I'll explain why in just one second. So I'll select the low frequency, publish, and select the high frequency, publish. And then if we come to our project pane here, you can see those two values are now in my project, and I can access them from here and set it all up. So what I'm going to do is select the low frequency and set that to 5000 Hertz. So that's 5K. So this will now be genuinely being driven just by those frequencies, above 5000 Hertz, which are pretty high. Okay, now we've done our basic setup, the rest is fairly easy. So I'm going to select the replicator here, right click, duplicate. I'm going to call this one high mid. I'm going to come to the offset value here, and what we need to do is we need to move it 10%. We need to adjust its offset by 10%. So what we're going to do is add 10% to the offset value. At the moment it's -25, so adding 10% to that gives us -15. And you'll see that we've got that segment there continuing on. Okay, now what we need to do is open it all up and come to the audio here. And let's again publish these frequencies. So select the low frequency, publish. Select the high frequency, publish. And let's come over to the project. And what I want to do here is I want to create an overlap of the frequencies. So the low frequency I'm going to set down to 1000, but the high frequency I'm going to set to 6000. So you'll see there's an overlap between my first low frequency and my second high frequency. And what that just does is gives it a better smoothing between these bands. They can look a bit sort of steppy and strange if you don't do that. But really this is up to you. And one of the reasons for publishing it like this is that you can very easily come back in, adjust the frequencies depending on your track. Okay, so that's our high mid sorted. Let's select high mid. Let's right click, duplicate. And let's call this mid. And again, we want to come to the offset and we want to add 10%. So it's minus 15 now, add 10%, that makes that minus 5. Again, we've added a segment here. Again, we want to open it up, come to the audio, and again, we just want to publish these frequencies. So low frequency, publish, high frequency, publish. And again, come to our project pane. So I'm going to set the low frequency to 500 this time, and the high frequency to 1100. So moving right along, let's select our mid, right click, duplicate, and let's call this low mid. Again, we want to adjust the offset, so we want to add 10%. So adding 10% to minus 5 gives us plus 5. Again, let's come to our audio here. Let's select the low frequency, publish, and let's select the high frequency and publish, and come back over to our project pane. The low frequency this time I'm going to set to 50, and the high frequency to 600. Again, you can see my previous low frequency was 500 and my new high frequency is 600. So we've again got that 100 Hertz overlap. And we're ready for our final segment. So right click, duplicate. Let's call this one low. And again, let's add 10% to our offset. So that's 15%. And now we've got our semicircle. And you probably remember that we need to come to our audio and publish these two frequency bands. So low frequency, publish, and high frequency, publish. Come over to our project. The low I'm going to set as low as it'll go, which is 11 Hertz. And our previous low frequency was 50 Hertz, so let's go for 60 Hertz for the high frequency. So there. One thing I omitted to do is that what I should have done is made this circle a little bit wider. I should have gone for a radius of 250. So I'm just going to quickly run through each of those and reset that. So 250 in each case just gives us a slightly better, larger circle. Will suit my design better. So there you go. Sorry to have not done that in the first place. So there we go. Okay, so we've got half our circle. I'm going to close that group down and call it right. And then to get our left-hand circle, I'm simply going to select that, right-click, make clone layer. Again, harnessing the power of clones. So I'm going to call this group left. And all we need to do here is come to the rotation, twirl that open, select the Y, and enter a value of 180. And there you go. We've got our visualizer, and that really is pretty simple, as you can see. Let me just talk to you about this rig here. You'll see that because we've been duplicating those layers, we've got those 5 audio behaviors now stacked up inside this rig, and that makes it much easier to swap out our music track. So if I come to my audio panel here, audio timeline, come over to my file browser, I'm going to bring in a different music track. Bring that into here. I'm going to turn off my original music track. Come to my track changer rig, come to the inspector. And all I need to do is grab this new music track called Dark Beats, and just drag it into each of those 5 source wells. And you can probably see as I'm doing that, the visualizer is changing. And then now you're probably thinking, well, that's cool. We could just use this checkbox to switch between those 2 music tracks. Well, it certainly updates the source wells, but it doesn't actually update the music track, no matter whether we change the music track down here or not. So the only way of updating it is, as I say, to drag the music track back into these source wells and ignore the fact that we've got a rig that supposedly ought to be able to change them. So I'm just going to drag my original music track back into those source wells. You can see again that it's updating this time. It wasn't updating when we flipped the rig around. So I don't think that's too hard a way of swapping out your music track. It's certainly a lot easier than going into each of the audio behaviors and switching it out from there. Okay, so let's close down our music timeline and let's have a look at stylizing this just a little bit. First of all, I want to come to my left-hand group there and I want to make a new group. So object new group, and I'm just going to throw those two into there so I can affect them jointly. Come over to the library. I want to grab filters, color correction, levels, add it to that group, and while I'm here I'm going to scroll down to the glow section and add a glint above the levels. So I'm going to come over to the levels, I'm going to select the blue, and I'm going to grab this white out value, that's this right hand tab at the bottom there, and just drag it down until we've got something like that, quite like that. And then let's have a look at our glint. Okay, let's first of all set the number of streaks to 2, and just want to reduce this down a bit, it's all a bit crazy. Let's go for a glint size of 1, and maybe just reduce the exposure down to 1. So that's probably quite like that. Let's have a look at it from the beginning. Yes, I like that. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is come down and I'm going to look for my rectangle here. That's the rectangle that we originally used to create the replicators. Come over to the shape, style, and I want to select fill mode gradient. And let's open up the gradient editor here. Click on the left hand color and let's set that to white, like that. Click on the left hand color and let's move that over towards that, just very, very slightly yellow. And then let's move that to the middle and let's hold down the Alt or Option key and drag that left hand tab all the way to the end there. And let's bring it in maybe just a little bit. And I think you can see what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to brighten up these tips here. So as I drag that towards the middle, that's just brightening the tips. And if I drag this one a little bit more towards the middle, I'm brightening up this area here. So now if we have a look at that, it's a little bit more interesting. I think I'm just going to reduce this one down a little bit more. Don't want that quite so extreme. In actual fact, that colour doesn't need to be yellow, it needs to be grey, like that, because the colorization is being taken care of by the levels up here. So we can just use grey values for this and it's actually a little lot more effective. Okay, so I'm going to come to library, I'm going to come to generators, and I'm going to look for lens flare, and I'm going to drag it into the top here. Come to the inspector. I'm going to increase the size quite a bit till that, you can see that ring is more or less touching the edge. I want to reduce the streak intensity down to 0, I'm not interested in streak. Then I want to come down here and select the circle mask tool. I'm going to hold down the Shift and Alt or Option key and drag out from the center till I've got a mask something like that. Come over to properties and center it up. Come back to the mask itself. Let's reduce the feather amount till we've got something like that. And let's come back over to our lens flare itself. Let's add a very small amount of yellow to the center like that. Then what I want to do is I want to link the intensity to our overall music track, but I want to link it to the low value. So that's going to be the kick drum. So I'm going to right click on intensity, add parameter behavior link, and I'm going to select the rectangle inside that low replicator there. Can you see that one? Just there. Drag that in. Source parameter, object, scale, Y. And now if we press play, you can see that's being driven by the kick drum. What we can do just to get a little bit more intensity is to increase the scale. Let's go for maybe 3 or possibly even 4 and see how that plays. Yep, I like that. I think that's pretty good. Another thing I'd like to do is take this group here, I'm going to call it visualizer, and I'm going to right click, make clone layer. And what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to increase the scale. Let's go for something like 250, something like that. And I'm going to reduce the opacity down to 1. Then I'm going to come over to the library, filters, come up to blur, grab the zoom blur and add that to the clone layer like that. Come over to the inspector and let's just increase that till we get something like that. More or less disappeared there, but that's what I want. I want this effect of it just being triggered when it's quite loud. So I get these quite nice rays that radiate off like that on the heavier beats. One final thing we could do is to add in a background. So let's come over to the library, content images. I'm just going to use the search here to look for concrete. And let's go for concrete 1, I think. Let's drag it in down here at the bottom. Come to the inspector, properties. Let's set the scale to 100%. And let's come over to the library. Let's clear that search result. Come up to filters, color correction, levels, that. Come to the inspector, let's reduce the whiteout value a lot here. Again, let's grab the blue value and reduce that down. Let's come to the RGB, increase the black value a lot till we get to something like that. It's quite nice, I think. Maybe even reduce that white value down a bit more, just so we've got just a hint of a background. Quite like that. I'd probably not have the radiating clone on this one if we're going to have it on a background. Or alternatively, you could grab this circular mask, Command C, come down to the concrete, Command V, and now we've only got our texture behind our sort of central lens there. Or we could invert it so we're not seeing anything behind the lens. So lots of possibilities. What I might also do is take the visualizer group there, right click, make clone layer, come to the library, blur, Gaussian blur, add that, come to the inspector, have a nice fat Gaussian blur amount, something like that. And let's just reduce the opacity of this down to about 50% or something. And you can see what I'm trying to do there. So I'm just trying to give it a little bit of a glow so it looks like it's sitting in the scene a little bit more. You could even duplicate that clone layer and come to the Gaussian blur and have a much larger amount, so 400 say. And again, just reduce the opacity down to 15 or something. So you can see those two, they just help it sit into the scene a little bit better. So hopefully there's plenty of ideas there for you to play with. Hope that's been an interesting one. Thanks very much indeed for watching, and I hope to see you again another time.